Okay, so real talk for a sec. Anyone else kind of overhearing about AI everywhere? Seriously. It's like every time I turn around, there's another big promise about how it's going to change the world.
Yeah.
But how much is hype? And how much is, actually going to happen? That's what we're diving into today.
Well, I'll say this much. We've definitely got a source who's not afraid to share their, shall we say, honest opinion on the matter.
Oh, you mean the blog post we're looking at? The one titled, I will fucking pile drive you if you mention AI again?
Yeah.
Subtle, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. And full disclosure, the title alone made me want to dig in. As someone who's been around the AI world for a while, let's just say I can relate to the sentiment.
For sure, for sure. But this isn't just someone ranting. This is written by an actual data scientist, someone who's in the trenches of all this. And they read some interesting questions about why so much of what we're seeing with AI right now might be, well, let's just say a tad overblown.
Totally agree. What really struck me is how they connect this current AI frenzy to other tech trends we've seen. Like, remember the whole dot-com bubble bursting back in the day? This feels kind of similar, lots of promises, not always a lot of substance. Like back in 2019, 2020, every company was scrambling to launch some AI initiative.
Right. It was AI everything. But did any of it really work as promised? That's what our data scientist friend is getting at, I think. Like they even call out these companies or maybe the people running these
Oh
companies.
yeah, the grifters, as they call them.
Yeah, exactly. Grifters, using AI buzzwords to climb the corporate ladder. And meanwhile, the author's point is that most companies can barely handle, like, basic software projects, let alone something as complex as true AI.
It's true. Like even simple stuff like database backups, the author says so many companies drop the ball on that. And you're telling me those same companies are going to be leading the AI revolution? I don't think so.
It's like they're trying to build a penthouse suite when the foundation is crumbling. I think that's a big part of what this data scientist is trying to get across. Companies are so focused on the shiny new AI thing, they're forgetting about the basics, like strong internal processes, good data management, that kind of thing.
100%. They actually make a really good analogy in the post. They talk about building a simple app, just a basic one that lets you create, read, update, and delete information.
Okay.
Software 101, right?
Yeah, totally.
But so many companies can't even pull that off consistently without going over budget, missing deadlines, the whole nine yards. So if they can't handle that, what makes them think they're ready for AI?
Good point. And it all ties back to the author's main argument, which is focus on getting your own house in order first. Strengthen those internal processes, build a solid data infrastructure, create a culture where people understand and use data well. Those are the things that will let you actually use AI effectively down the line should you choose to.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's like, I don't know, trying to compete in Formula One with a car that has square wheels.
I love that analogy. And you know what else is kind of funny, but also kind of scary? They mentioned they have a friend, works at one of those huge tech companies, the ones always making headlines about their AI. Well, this friend let it slip that a bunch of those fancy AI demos they were trotting out, totally faked.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. So even the big players, the ones everyone thinks are leading the charge, even they're guilty of overselling what AI can do.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely food for thought. It seems like the more we hear about AI, the more important it is to take it all with a grain of salt. Be skeptical, ask tough questions, and don't just assume that what you're seeing or hearing is the whole picture.
Totally. Okay, so we've established that there's a lot of hype around AI right now. But where do we go from here? What does the future actually hold? Well, our data scientist friend gives us three potential scenarios. They call them AI explosion, incremental progress, and significant advancement.
It's actually a pretty helpful framework for thinking about the different ways AI could play out, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. And each one has some pretty big implications for, well, basically everything. Our work, our lives, the whole world, really. So let's break them down, shall we?
Sounds good to me.
All right, so first up, the most dramatic of the bunch.
Yeah.
The AI explosion. Imagine this. AI suddenly becomes so smart it starts improving itself at an insane rate. We're talking sci-fi levels of intelligence here, stuff that could potentially even outpace our ability to understand or control it.
Yeah, that's the scenario that tends to capture the imagination, right? The idea that AI could become so advanced that it surpasses human capabilities, leading to all sorts of unpredictable and maybe even dangerous outcomes.
Right. The author actually jokes about aliens coming down and using humans as some kind of advanced epoxy because AI took over and that's the best use they could find for us.
Okay, well, hopefully it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, fingers crossed on that one. But even though that's a bit out there, it does highlight a very real anxiety a lot of people have about technology, right? This fear that creates something that ends up surpassing us and potentially even harming us in the process.
Absolutely. And it's important to acknowledge those fears, to have open and honest conversations about the potential risks of AI as well as its benefits. But it's also important to ground our understanding in, reality. The author isn't saying that AI couldn't have a huge impact, but they seem to be saying that we're probably a ways off from the whole robot overlords scenario.
Okay, so maybe we're safe from becoming alien epoxy, at least for now. But what about those other scenarios, the ones that are maybe a bit more, well, realistic? Let's talk about those after we take a quick break.
Okay, so we're back and diving into those other AI futures, the ones that are maybe a little less robots taking over the world.
Right, so the second scenario, the one the author calls incremental progress, it's all about AI steadily getting better, evolving over time. But no, like sudden massive leaps forward, no sentient robots tomorrow or anything, which I'm sure some people are going to be relieved to hear. But this is where it gets really interesting, I think, especially for anyone who's, not a tech whiz, who's not out there building AI in their garage. Because the author's point is, if AI just keeps getting a little bit better each year, than just slapping an AI-powered sticker on your product. That's not going to cut it.
Yeah, that's not a strategy, it's a marketing gimmick.
Exactly. So in this incremental progress world, the companies who are going to actually win, it's not just about using AI. It's about understanding it, knowing how and when to use it strategically, finding those places where AI can actually make a real difference.
100%. It's about using AI to solve real problems, not just using it for the sake of using it.
Yeah, totally. Like they give this example of, what was it called? Todoist. Yeah. It's that task management app. Anyway, they added this AI feature where you can use natural language to make all these really specific, kind of complex filters for your to-do list.
I've used that. It's incredibly handy.
Right. It's like you can just tell your to-do list, hey, show me anything due next week that's related to this project, and boom, it just does it. No more messing around with a bunch of menus and drop-downs.
That's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's not flashy, it's not going to make headlines, but it actually makes your life easier. And in the long run, that's what's going to set companies apart.
Totally, totally. So to sum up incremental progress, it's all about working smarter, not harder. Using AI strategically to solve specific problems and make things better little by little. But what about the third scenario, the one they call significant advancement?
All right, so this is where things get really interesting, especially for businesses, because this is the scenario where AI, yeah, it makes some pretty big leaps forward. It might even start to approach like general intelligence, AI that can learn and adapt to all sorts of different tasks, not just one specific thing.
Okay, and so here's where our data scientist friend really goes in on all those companies who are just blindly chasing AI trends.
Yeah, they are not holding back in this scenario, are they?
Not at all. Because their point is, if AI advances this quickly, all those companies who've been wasting time and energy cobbling together like chatbot solutions or just slapping AI on their marketing materials and hoping nobody notices,
They're going to get left in the dust.
big time. It's like, what's that saying? You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig.
Well, in this case, it's more like you can put lipstick on a pig and teach it to say a few words, but it's still not going to win you the Nobel Prize in literature.
Okay, yeah, that's even better. But it's true. Like, you can't just slap some AI on a bad product or a broken process and expect it to magically fix everything. It's like they say in the Post, it's like trying to outrun a tsunami in a rowboat. You might stay afloat for a little while, but you're not going to outrun that wave.
And the companies that are going to make it, the ones who'll thrive in a world where AI is making these big leaps forward, they're the ones who focused on the fundamentals. Building a strong foundation, a culture of continuous improvement, a deep understanding of what their data actually means and how to use it.
So it's not enough to just use AI. You have to actually understand it
Yeah,
and be ready to adapt as it gets better.
exactly. And that's something this author hammers home again and again. Trying to win with AI when your internal processes are a mess, when your data is all over the place. It's like, they use this great analogy. It's like entering a race car with square wheels. You've got to fix the fundamentals first.
So we've talked about all this AI hype, all the potential pitfalls, the different ways things could go. But at the end of the day, how do we make sense of it all? Like, how do we cut through the noise and figure out what's real and what's just, hype?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And honestly, there's no easy answer. But if I had to pick one thing that's absolutely essential for navigating this whole AI landscape, it's critical thinking.
Okay, so put on our thinking caps, got it.
Yep.
But what does that actually look like in practice, like when we're specifically talking about AI?
Well, for starters, it means being skeptical. Question everything. Don't just take claims about AI at face value, especially when they're coming from people or companies that stand to benefit if you buy into their version of the story.
Yeah, our data scientist friend would definitely agree with that. They don't seem to have much patience for what they call AI grifters, remember?
Exactly. And they actually make a really interesting point about these so-called grifters. They say that a lot of these folks, they jump from one tech trend to the next. Blockchain, quantum computing, now it's AI. They latch on to whatever's hot at the moment without ever really developing a deep understanding of the technology itself.
So they're all about chasing the next big wave, hoping they can ride it to success without getting too wet in the process.
Exactly. And the thing is, real innovation, real progress, it rarely comes from just chasing trends. It comes from a place of genuine curiosity, a willingness to experiment, and a commitment to solving real-world problems.
They actually tell this funny story in the Post. They were on vacation in Fiji at a resort, and they were trying to get them to sign up for this free membership. Sounds familiar, right?
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, they're reading through the terms and conditions, like you do, and buried in all the fine print, there's this clause about how by signing up, they're agreeing to let the resort use their data to train AI models.
Wow. Sneaky.
Right. It's like, come on, I'm just trying to enjoy my vacation here.
Yeah.
Leave me and my data out of it.
I hear you. But it's a perfect example of how our data is increasingly being used in ways we might not even realize, often to benefit companies we have no relationship with. So
Yeah.
it's more important than ever to be aware of our digital footprint and to demand greater transparency and control over how our data is being used.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if we can't always trust the hype or the people selling it, where can we turn for reliable information about AI?
Well, that's where it becomes crucial to diversify our information sources. Don't just rely on the flashy headlines or the corporate press releases. Seek out perspectives from academics, researchers, journalists, even artists and ethicists who are grappling with the implications of AI.
They also talk about how we should be wary of becoming overly reliant on AI tools ourselves, even the ones that seem really helpful. They mentioned that they used to use that AI-powered coding assistant, Copilot, but they stopped using it because they felt like it was making them a lazier programmer.
Yeah, that's a concern that a lot of experts have raised, that these AI tools, as helpful as they can be, might actually end up diminishing some of our own cognitive skills.
It's like if we always rely on our phones to tell us where to go, will we eventually forget how to read a map?
Exactly. And while there's certainly value in using AI tools to automate tasks and boost our productivity, it's important to strike a balance to make sure we're not becoming so dependent on them that we lose the ability to think for ourselves.
So it sounds like navigating this AI hype cycle, it's about more than just understanding the technology itself. It's about sharpening our critical thinking skills, being discerning consumers of information, and remembering that AI, at its core, is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Well said. And it's our responsibility, both individually and collectively, to ensure that it's used thoughtfully, ethically, and in a way that benefits all of humanity.
And that brings us to something I think is really worth pondering as we wrap up our deep dive today. What skills and qualities are going to be most essential for thriving in a world that's increasingly shaped by AI? Obviously, technical skills are going to be important, but what about things like creativity, critical thinking, empathy, the ability to connect with other human beings on a deeper level? Are those qualities going to become even more important in an AI-driven world?
These are the questions we all need to be asking ourselves,
Hmm.
because while AI has the potential to automate so many of the tasks that currently occupy our time and energy, it's our uniquely human qualities that will ultimately determine what we do with that freed up time and energy. How we choose to connect with each other, how we choose to shape the world around us, those are the things that will define our future, not just as workers or consumers, but as human beings.
Well said. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. A future full of possibilities, both exciting and a little bit daunting. And while we might not have all the answers, hopefully, this deep dive has given us all some things to think about, some tools to navigate this new landscape, with a healthy dose of skepticism, a discerning eye, and maybe even a sense of optimism about what the future holds.
I think so too.